You're listening to Tiger Livy's story, an interview with the authors, Erin Garcia and Betsy Miller, on the Child Life On Call podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. When your child is sick, the whole world seems to stop in its tracks. Plans and priorities change, and your number one job becomes figuring out how to get your child well again. For some of us, rest, medications, and relaxation can do the trick. But for others, it takes more. It takes countless doctor appointments, invasive medical testing, therapies, surgeries. The list goes on. And then you still may not have all of the answers or results you were hoping for. This podcast features parents of children that have an illness or medical condition and gives them a place to share their own journeys and experiences. We will talk about the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, but one thing seems to remain the same. Children are resilient and teach us more about ourselves and the world than we could ever imagine. Thank you so much for lending a listening ear and opening up your heart to these families and this podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor. Hello, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. I am your host, Katie Taylor. And I am so happy that you are joining in and listening today because today's episode is a little bit different than normal. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know that typically I interview parents of children that have an illness, disease, medical condition, or hospital experience and give them a place to share their stories. And pretty often, actually very often in every episode, we hear about not just the child or the parent that has an illness, but the other family members that are affected by a child getting sick. And so I'm excited to share with you today's interview because I got to talk to Erin Garcia, who is the aunt of an amazing little girl named Olivia. I'm going to let Erin talk to you about JDM. One, because I'm terrible at actually pronouncing the name, and two, because she is way more educated about the topic. What I love about this interview is that we are able to talk to someone who is outside of that central family unit of the child that has the illness, but still finds a way, and a positive way at that, to turn a lot of sadness, a lot of heartache, a lot of worries, a lot of what do I do, how can I help my family, into something that will truly make a difference, not only for her niece and for her family, but this book is going to have an impact on every child and parent that reads it. Betsy, who experienced her own limitations as a child, and Erin, who grew up with a brother who had multiple hospitalizations, really give us some insight into how people on the outside can truly help and what that actually can look like. So without further ado, here is my interview with the authors of Tiger Livy, Erin Garcia, and Betsy Miller.
Thank you so much for having us, Katie. My name is Erin Garcia. I'm originally from Southern California, but now reside in Fresno, California. It's in the central part of the state. I am a high school English teacher, and I am the co-author of Tiger Livy, a book written for children dealing with chronic illness and their families. And my co-author is Betsy Miller, a woman I had never met, but knew she was a professional author. And we have a mutual friend, and they had collaborated before. And so we connected for Tiger Livy. That's how we met each other.
Hi, I'm Betsy Miller. I'm up in Santa Rosa, also in California. And as Erin said, we happen to have a friend in common. I'm a technical writer, but I also write other things on the side. Usually they're to do with children's health. I had written a few nonfiction books on specific health topics, and then I had a picture book, Hip Hop Hooray for Brooklyn, which was about a little bunny that loves to hop and wears a brace at night. And I co-authored that with Jill, who knows Erin. So Erin approached me about the Tiger Livy book idea, and it was quite a project. It took a lot of revision to get it from concept to something that was really a viable picture book. But I'm super pleased with how it turned out.
Yes, I just love the book. As soon as Erin sent it to me and I was able to read it, I had tears streaming down my face. And as a child life specialist, I'm able to see a lot of different pictures books about children's health, but this one really stuck out to me. So I love that. Betsy, I'm just curious, what made you want to write about children's health specifically?
Oh, well, the first book I wrote was The Parent's Guide to Hip Dysplasia. I actually had hip dysplasia when I was born, and I was treated for it in infancy. And then when I was in my late 30s, I started to have some hip pain, and I did a little research and found that there were no books at that time about hip dysplasia, which was kind of surprising because it seems like there's a book about everything, and then every once in a while you come across something that you can't find anywhere. So I wrote that book first, and then it was a really different kind of writing than what I was used to because I had been doing technical writing up until then. So it was challenging, but also really gratifying and a very different target audience. Most of the tech writing I'd done was for, people who are fairly technical, not a lot for new moms, but I was pleased with how it turned out, and it was something that turned out to be very helpful for a lot of moms. So then I wrote another one, The Parent's Guide to Clubfoot, and in that book I had a short children's story with illustrations that I fit in there because that is for kids in their first 5 years. They wear a brace at night. And that was kind of how I connected with Jill because she had seen that story. And she, as a parent of a child with clubfoot, saw a need for picture books. There were a couple out there, but there was a different kind of picture book she had in mind than what was already there. And so I jumped into the picture book world, which was also different, but also very gratifying.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's so relatable, and it's a story you can read to a child in a hospital, and it's a story I can read to my son at night at bedtime. So it seems to be pretty universal and relatable. But I'd love to hear from you, Erin. This book is about your niece, and please talk a little bit about her and the inspiration behind creating this book.
Yeah, definitely. So Livy is my niece, and she is now 7 years old, but was diagnosed with juvenile dermatomyositis when she was 5. So it's a pretty rare chronic condition. It's an autoimmune disease that basically kind of comes on very fast, and the onset is fatigues the child and wears him down, but the muscle begins deteriorating is basically what's happening, and the body kind of attacks its muscles. I know that's not the exact scientific definition, but that's basically what happens. So she was a very typical, active, healthy child one day, and then the next day she couldn't crawl into bed and couldn't do a lot of the things that she used to do. And this disease is pretty rare, so it's often misdiagnosed. And as I've learned more about it, and I think this is the case for a lot of people dealing with kind of rare or off the radar type of stuff, the misdiagnosis can cause a lot of other unintended consequences. But thankfully, her doctor, even though it was misdiagnosed, he thought it was similar to leukemia or lymphoma or something like that. He thought it was a cancer. And that's actually kind of how they treat this disease, is sort of like a cancer. It's really serious. But he immediately sent them to a children's hospital in Los Angeles. And no, it wasn't cancer. It was juvenile dermatomyositis, which also required really intensive and extensive long-term care. So she got help pretty much immediately as soon as they knew something was wrong. And so the condition is one where, you lose all control. Like at one point, she couldn't hold her neck up. At one point she could barely swallow her food. So that was like at its peak. And that's even with early treatment. So in some ways she's so lucky that she has so much medical treatment, but it's pretty devastating. And what she had to take, besides the IVIG, which is like a treatment that you have to get once a month, you have to go to the hospital, and it's like a thing that basically flushes your system out, I think. But but she also had to take steroid treatments and things like that. And if you know anyone who's ever had to take a steroid to get better or to curb, other effects, it's really devastating. And she gained a lot of weight, grew a lot of hair all over her face, all over her body. And she really had a hard time managing her emotions. They were all over the place because that's one of the side effects of steroid treatment. And so, witnessing this it's just devastating. But I have 2 children who are about her age. And I also grew up with a brother who was chronically hospitalized. He was born with many congenital issues, and there's a variety of side effects that would come with his surgeries that you could never anticipate. You always knew it was a risk, but it's, I think anyone who deals with illness or, anything where you ever require hospitalization, you don't ever go from point A to point B, right? From my personal experiences, as a child growing up with a brother who had so many, hospitals are not scary to me. I've spent many, many hours in them. I think my brother's probably had over 30 surgeries in his lifetime. But now as an adult, to watch my sweet niece go through this, and, she's best friends with my children, and she's basically their same ages, they're very close in age. I just wanted to do something about it. And I just remember feeling so powerless as a child, seeing my brother endure these things. And it's so stressful on a family. And it's so, no one really understands unless you're really in it. And I just think that's stinky and horrible. And so I wanted to try to help. We don't live close to them. And I couldn't really do hospital visits or, do things like that. And I really thought hard about what would be meaningful. And so that's how this story came to life. And through the generosity and kindness of people like Betsy and Ivory, our illustrator, we have made, I think, a brilliant book that really addresses something that really hasn't, I don't think it's really been tapped into. And unfortunately, statistics say that there's more and more kids every day who have some kind of chronic condition. So there's a need for it,
Absolutely. Well, you hit the nail on the head when saying it's just so stressful on the family. And something like this book that you guys created makes it a little bit easier because it's another reinforcement that families are not alone when they're dealing with this. And either of you can answer this question, but I just feel like you did such an amazing job at putting Livy's emotions into words and describing how they affected her. And you even talked on some of the social points about how friendships change. And I was just wondering what your process was in gaining this insight and kind of putting it on paper.
Erin had a lot of that down in her initial draft. She had something that was much too long to be a picture book, but she's one of those writers who writes her way to a destination. So she had to think through how to crystallize that, because a number of the things that were in the original draft didn't need to stay. Things that were about how Livy looked, because there's going to be pictures. And if you haven't written a picture book before, then those kind of things help you think through the beginning, but they can go away. It's harder, I think, to really think about the reader experience, and you want to follow the timeline of what happens when someone gets sick, but also you want to not be too depressing and think about those bright moments that come in, and also the times when you're struggling in a way that's not sort of wagging your finger at someone. Because, if somebody looks really different the next day, people notice, and, it may affect friendships, but that doesn't mean you want to make the person who's maybe trying to figure out what's going on feel bad. So you want a book that anybody can read, not just the person who's sick. You don't want to shame somebody for being confused or maybe pointing a finger when they're a little kid. So you want to be inclusive in a way that helps people follow the journey of this main character, but then also kind of learn from things like, oh, that's how that feels. I think a lot of times children's books will have a representative person who's maybe someone in a wheelchair or someone who has a health issue, but they may not be the main character. So sometimes the books are how to be kind to your friend versus how to get through this yourself. So I like the focus of the book being that way. And it just took, honestly, a lot of revision. We'd go through and we'd have a draft, and then we'd look through it and think, did we leave anything out? Are we repeating ourselves any place? Because a picture book is so short. You just want to hit everything that's essential and nothing else, but it needs to be compelling because otherwise people put it down, right? You want them to get all the way to that finish line when Livy she's recovering, but not only is she recovering, she's learned to be a kinder person. So she's got that empathy for somebody else who is maybe going through a tough time. And the book ends, without too much of a spoiler here, with her smiling at the reader and having the thought that she sees the tiger inside somebody else. So for a child who is maybe sick and reading this, the hope is that they'll think, oh, she gets it. And she would be my friend, even if I look funny or different or I feel awkward. It's like I've got a new friend now.
Totally. I mean, I have to say that the ending is, and without the spoiler alert, like what brought the tears on. It was just a full circle moment. It was really cool.
Yeah, I think being too preachy is obviously off-putting for anyone reading it. And we've all read those books. And I also remember hating when people would say, like, oh, you're so brave, you're so strong, your family's so strong, like when my brother was sick or something. And I just was, or like when people say, oh, I could never do that, or, oh, I could never understand, you guys are so brave, or, God chooses someone special for this to happen to. It's like, I don't think anyone, I'm not sure about that. And it's always something that that someone means it in a kind way. I know that, and a lot of times people don't know what to say. So I think that sometimes when people say that, and I think maybe if it hits you at the wrong moment, or, it can be kind of devastating, when people have these well-meaning, things that it's just like, geez, I wouldn't choose this if I didn't have to. No one chooses this, and no one can really imagine this. And so what the ultimate goal was, and Betsy really, really was significant in helping us get there, was I wanted it to be something that, kids who aren't specifically dealing with this issue right now or personally could still start and finish this book and get something out of it. Because, I think that's the value of books. But it's really tricky to do for our age group that we're hitting. But I know that it would have been really helpful if a lot more people were more aware. And I just think that one of the underpinnings of my motivation was I think the chronic illness is very devastating. And it's part of devastating. It's really devastating because it's not what you anticipate. No one ever plans this. No one ever expects this. And what I've noticed about healing from chronic illness is it never really goes as you plan, as you think it should. Like, okay, the doctor said I could finish this medicine, so then once I'm done with the medicine, I'll be all good, right? And 9 times out of 10, you don't, just because you finished a medicine, or just because it's been 7 weeks from your surgery, or just because, whatever time frame you've been given, that's, there's all these lingering repercussions from the illness that is never really talked about in a meaningful way. And I think, at least for children, and I think it's hard for parents to talk about it. And so picture books are so brilliant in that you can have those kind of tougher conversations because you can talk about this character and what it looks like to get better, and that it's really hard to get better. It's work. And especially for children who are really young dealing with illness, like you as a child life specialist, you see like kids who are way young who are dealing with, basically their life, in their hands sometimes. And they have to do all the hard work. They're the ones getting the shots. They're the ones getting the treatments. And that's, I think, what's so hard for parents, too. There's really not a whole lot that the parent can do to take away that pain. And so empowering a child to be able to deal with these heavy, heavy situations is, in my opinion, very empowering, because you don't want your child who's chronically ill to identify with being a victim all the time. And I think it's a very understandable thing that can happen, but it's not good. You don't want your child to be victimized. And so you have to find ways to get some wins, and sometimes it's just like, well, let's start with your mindset because that's the only thing we can control right now, but it's not everything, and there's much more. We need a community to help. And when you're really sick, the last thing you want to do is ask for help. It's like, I just want to not be sick anymore. But, that connectedness, especially like your podcast, getting people united is really powerful and can help you overcome a lot of things. But when you're really stressed out and really fighting for either your life or your kid's life or whatever's going on, that's like the most time you need it, and it needs to be accessible. And so we hope that that's what this book is.
Oh, absolutely. And it kind of immediately made me feel empathy, not only for Livy, but for her family as well. And Erin, exactly what you said is immediately how I felt when I was reading this book. And I have kind of a personal question for you. And you mentioned a little bit about how people can come up and have well-meaning things to say, but it really isn't received the way it was intended. And I was wondering if you have any specific examples of when somebody said something to you and it was helpful and it was supportive. What does that look like?
So, that is such a good question. I personally, and this is just me, I know I don't speak for everyone. But for me, what was helpful when like our family had, like nurses living in our house to help care for my brother. I didn't, even I was in maybe 7th grade, 8th grade when that was going on. So I was older, and I just didn't realize like how stressful it was on me. But like in hindsight, I do, because there were certain things that I was doing that was maybe like not super great, but I was stressed out, But I think the most helpful thing that really stood out in my mind was all of my aunts would make time to like take me places or do things with me. And just, I had quality time because my parents, they worked, and my brother just demanded so much time. And it wasn't really so much what they said, it's really what they did. I couldn't tell you one, card that got written or sent on a thing of flowers, But I did remember when someone took us out to eat, or when my aunt took us on vacation. I have a younger brother too, and so she took my younger brother and I on a road trip, and a lot of it happens to be my aunts just because they lived in the area, but they were just profoundly helpful to my family in that they alleviated a stress by giving my brother and I, we had a fun time, and my parents were like, okay, we don't need to worry about them for these next few days or whatever it was, And so I think what people do is much better than anything than you could say. Like, okay, you really care? Like, take my dry cleaning to the store, or, whatever it is. Like, when you're in a position where you're sick, you're really never going to ask for that. Like, oh, let me know if you need anything to help. That's like the worst question you can ask. Like, I don't know, I need you to like do my taxes for me. Like, it's just so hard to really genuinely answer that question. You know what I need? I need you to like let me cry on your shoulder for 3 hours because I'm so stressed out. Like no one's going to say that to you. So it's more like show up. You want to help, spend the time. And if you don't, then, that's okay. You could send a card. But for me as a person, I don't think that was very helpful. Maybe my brothers would feel differently, but I highly doubt it. And so that was a big part of this because I was really frustrated, just seeing this little kid sick, and we love her dearly, we love her family dearly. And like, what am I going to do? Call and be like, oh, how you doing? I'm doing horrible, like they're not going to answer that question. So you really, they wanted to raise money for their foundation, the Cure JM Foundation. And I was like, I'm not going to do a bake sale to like raise money for that. I'm just in school. My husband and I are school teachers. Like we're not, millionaires or anything like that. So this was sort of like my inspiration for what could I really do that could in some way help them achieve their goals and help empower Livy and, kind of hit a lot of those things when there's no way I could regularly see them, and this is what I came up with, so.
I love it. Well, Betsy, can you just talk to us about what some of your favorite parts about Tiger Livy are? And what's your favorite part of the book, if you can pick one?
I think I like the ending because we actually spent a lot of time trying to get there. And when I thought of that last kind of internal twist, it was like, yes, that's it, because we were walking around a little bit the idea of her being happy and smiling, but at the same time, it's okay if you're not happy and smiling, and especially if you're sick. So it's more that the smile is a conscious gift from Livy to the reader because she feels like doing that, not because when you get better, you have to smile now.
Yes, that's so true. Betsy, if you mentioned the other books that you have written, and where would people be able to find those books, especially in the child life community? We are always looking for good picture books and parent resources. So where would the listeners be able to find that information?
Oh, well, they are definitely available through online booksellers. And if you just want to see everything I've done, if you search for Betsy Miller books, then you can probably find my website. But just to kind of run through them, there's Hip Hop Hooray for Brooklyn, which is a picture book, and that one is to help children who have to wear a brace at night. And it's a fun book. It has jump rope rhymes in it because she's a little bunny and she loves to hop, and it's all about being in motion and setting goals. And the brace is a little bit incidental, but it's there because she wears the brace so that she's able to move in the daytime. So it kind of has that idea of working towards a goal, that things don't happen instantly, but you can still have a lot of fun, and it's more child-focused than brace-focused. So there's that one. And then the other three are all orthopedic topics. The Parent's Guide to Hip Dysplasia, The Parent's Guide to Clubfoot, and The Parent's Guide to Perthes. Perthes is a rare childhood disease that affects the hip. So those are my books, and they're out there for whoever wants to find them. And I hope that some of the listeners will be happy to discover them.
Great. Thank you so much. And Erin, if you would just, I guess, talk to us about how we can support and find the Tiger Livy book specifically, and then a little bit about the foundation that you are giving some of the proceeds to.
So you can find the book. Any reader could find it on Amazon, or if you have, Barnes & Noble can order it for you and have it in your store. Almost any bookseller, I'm sure, could do that. But Amazon is a really easy one. And if you're in Fresno, go to Petunia's Place or Vividly Vintage and support a local business. But the proceeds from this book are going to the Cure JM Foundation, which is JM stands for juvenile dermatomyositis, which is what Livy has. And they're currently trying to find research for a cure for this rare disease. They don't have one right now, and it's just kids are just dealing with treatments. But right now in the JM community, the IVIG that the victims of this disease have, there's a shortage of it. And so the treatment that a lot of these kids are dependent on, Livy included, is staggered a bit more than the doctors would like because there's not enough of it. And anyways, it's just, it's really hard and it's really expensive. And there's a lot of, I'm sure your listeners know a lot about insurance, and that's not always easy. And so we want to try to find a cure for this. It's important to Livy's parents and their family because it really offers them some hope when they felt like, man, there just wasn't anything. And so I thought that this would be a great help for them and what their desire is, because there's no FDA-approved drug right now to treat this. So that's also part of the equation. And so the Cure JM Foundation is going to receive the proceeds from our sales. And it's great. It's a great organization that helps a lot of parents and kids.
Well, I am just so thankful to Erin and Betsy, not only for taking the time to do this interview for you guys, but also just for taking the time to do this book and then giving the proceeds to Cure JM. It's pretty incredible. Some exciting news is that the book is currently being translated into Spanish, which is wonderful. And there's also an ebook available that you can download on Amazon. So I know child life specialist parents, it's hard to find copies, but you can actually download the book, which is really great. So I highly recommend it. I really enjoy the book. I enjoy both of the authors and the meaning behind it. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. As always, please follow along with me on Child Life On Call on Instagram and Facebook, and comment and send me an email at info@childlifepodcast.com. And I will look forward to seeing you with the next episode. Have a great week.